let's talk about the big F, fatherhood. Let's
Okay,
Yes,
sure.
let's talk about
fatherhood.
let's talk about good and bad because I'm sure we have a lot to talk about, but the sad reality of the world we live in nowadays is that nobody, at least most of the people I talk to, don't really have a father that they can look up to the same way that reflects God the Father to them, right? I was in a very convenient experience where I had a father who was like that, but it doesn't it's not common, right? And so whenever we talk about fatherhood, we also have to keep in mind that it's very idealistic to say this is what fatherhood should be, right? When the reality that most people live is not the fatherhood that you would want, right? I mean, if anybody has a father out there who is teaching them to be like God the Father or teaching them to be holy, good on you, right? But you got to recognize how great that is, right? Which is something I wasn't really grateful for until I was much older and was starting to make big decisions about my future, when I started to recognize the true value of having a father who taught me to be holy and what the value of that was, right? Because I would cite that was the main reason I was able to get married so young, is because that missing element that a lot of people have in their lives of that father who teaches them to be like God, right? I had that, and that just made me so much more ready to accept vocation that I wouldn't have been otherwise, right? It's just tough. But I guess I'll go first, being the prospective father of the lot. I've been thinking a lot about fatherhood recently, especially because Father's Day is coming up on Sunday. I mean, this video is probably not going to come
Yeah.
up before then, but
Happy first Father's Day, James.
yeah, I
Oh
guess so.
yeah.
It's my first Father's Day. I've been thinking a lot about, I think the thing that I think about most about fatherhood is not necessarily about a baby, right? Because like the baby, it sleeps, it eats, it needs love. That's not overly difficult, right? It's time consuming and it's tiring, right? But like it's not complicated what the baby needs when it's a baby, right? I think more about like me when I was growing up and just learning how to be a man, right? And how my father was a part of that, and places where my father failed to be a part of that, right? And things like that, and how I want to be different or how I want to be the same, right? It's a lot of things I've started to have to think about, right? Because fatherhood is right around the corner. And I think my father was excellent in teaching me to be holy, and I think my father was excellent in teaching me discipline. But one thing I know that my father had lacked in is that he didn't create an atmosphere in the home where I felt like I could talk to my father about something I was struggling with, right? That was the main problem that we had, where like we respected the hell of our father, right? The three of us, the three siblings, but none of us felt comfortable talking to our father about something we needed help with, right? Unless there was no one else to turn to. And I've had times in my life where there was no one else to turn to except my dad to help me with things, right? And he reacts as you expect, right? He reacts in a strict disciplinary fashion, right? And that kind of makes you think that you don't want to share your brokenness with your father. And I don't want to end up being the kind of father where if my son, right, ends up going through something really difficult, that they can't talk to me about it, right? Whether it's their fault or my fault or whatever, right? Like I don't want my son to feel like they can't talk to me about something important that's happening in their life, right? Or talk to me about, what they're struggling with, talk to me about addiction, talk to me about sin. I don't want to have a son who can't talk to me about those things. But at the same time, I have to learn how to be strict and disciplinary and learn how to teach to be a man, right? So it's difficult to balance those two things. And I think that's mostly what I've been thinking about as Father's Day gets closer. How am I supposed to make my son feel like it's okay to talk to me about things that he's struggling with, and at the same time teach him discipline and respect and authority and holiness, right? It's definitely difficult. Yeah, that's what I've been thinking about. But I still think that fatherhood is definitely something that needs to be talked about a lot more, because I don't think that we talk about it. I don't think people really sit down and think like, how am I going to be a father? I know I didn't, right? Even though I was married and having a baby, I know I didn't really sit down and think about what kind of father I want to be, right? And now I have to think
Mhm.
about that and how all the decisions I make are going to impact my son's life going forward, you know? So,
Yeah.
It is, you're right. It is a very difficult conversation to have, right? Especially in what I guess a postmodern society. Like here, or you'll often hear people simply just agree with the fact that there probably is little to no difference between a mother and a father, right? That's what people will promote. That's what people will say and believe, and they'll really fight you over it, right? They'll say like, "What do you mean you want to be a good father, right? Just be a good parent." Because a mother can do anything that a father can, right? And I don't mean to like get very like social justicey and talk about society and stuff, but it is difficult to have that conversation about fatherhood. You're right, James. Um, but yeah, that speaks a lot. Not being able to talk to your dad about your issues, definitely something that I can relate and empathize with. Same experience, very difficult to talk to my dad. I mean, I haven't spoken to him in quite some time now, actually. And that's for several reasons. Like, my dad is not, he doesn't play a big part in my life. Um, he tries to, but it just doesn't work out. And, you know, it's for many reasons. Like, one, my parents are separated. Two, my dad is not Catholic, he's a Muslim. So when we have discussions on faith and religion, it's just there's no connect. Um, and yeah, three is that he's been out of my life so much that he's missed out on these essential moments for me to grow. Um, I guess the good parts of my dad, um, he was very prayerful, um, very very prayerful, and I admire that of him, despite him being Muslim. I really do admire the fact that he's willing to take out time from his day, pray 5 times a day, fully adhere to the requirements of Ramadan, the requirements of Islam, um, and he's pretty faithful, and I respect him for that. Um, Other parts of my dad that I'm really proud of, he's very generous. If you ever asked him for something, if you ever asked for his hand, he would give an arm, you know, or he would give both hands. So he was always willing to help people, whoever asked for it. Um, in terms of the failures or, where my dad falls short, oh man, I don't want to spend the podcast trashing my dad. So I won't.
right.
But let's just say,
Yeah, you don't have
there's a
to.
lot of things that he didn't do. Um, he, again, when I would tell him stuff that's going on in my life, he didn't really listen to me. When I had kind of looked for him to train me in certain things, he never really had the time. Um, and a lot, I don't think I've even gotten too much meaningfulness in my identity from my dad, right? I think part of it, of why I'm very devout in my Catholicity, is because I rely on God the Father, and this has been something my mom has kind of instilled in me a lot as a child. Whenever my dad just was not present or available, my mom would always say, Ismail, you're the luckiest son or boy in the whole world because you have God as your father, right? Whatever you need, ask your heavenly father, right? If you're looking for support in something, don't ask your dad for it. Just go straight to God because he's your dad, right? Um,
Mm.
and I think it's very beautiful the way that my mom described it to me when I was a kid and growing up. I think it really helped to foster the kind of relationship I have with God today, that I can kind of approach him and embrace him with such childlike love. And again, like, it goes to show, like, back to my engagement story, right? Like, when I was kind of looking for security, when I was looking for hope and provision, it was my heavenly father that provided for me in the moment, right? um but yeah, I would say, one thing to take note of, um when you do start to look at your own father and examine the way that he's fathered, I would say when you really find out and start to learn about what good fatherhood is, or when you see those examples of good fatherhood, don't take it out too much on your dad. Like there are some things that you can expect from him. You can expect his love, and he owes that to you as his son, right? But don't start complaining, or start taking your dad for granted, right? If he's there, you got to appreciate every moment that you get with him, or every moment that he wants to spend time with you, but that's as much as I can say. I think in terms of what I want to be as a father, my number one goal is to be present. I want to be there whenever my son is doing something, in every major accomplishment in his life. I want to be there, right? Because my own father didn't do the same things for me, right? I count my baptism, my confirmation, my first communion, all these moments at church as very crucial and important moments in my life. And despite how young I was at the time and how young I am now, I was able to recognize the importance of those moments. And I was always looking for my dad there. My high school graduation, my university graduation, all these things I kind of was expecting from my dad, and I didn't get it from him at those times. Learning how to ride a bike, learning how to change a tire on a car, learning how to swim or play sports. These are things I just didn't get from my dad. But that's what I want to do, right? Of course, I don't want to make an inner vow and then end up failing my future son later on in the future. But that's ideally the goal, right? I want to be able to just be present and be there and to guide him, to be the father in those moments.
Fantastic. Oh, that's really great. I love especially how you pull on your relationship with God the Father to really fill that void that's in your heart. I think that's beautiful. I think that's a beautiful way that you've come to heal from that,
Thanks, Chris.
And I think I actually learned something.
You're beautiful too.
Oh, thanks, Ish.
I think it's very important that you can learn from Ish and that he doesn't blame his father for the problems that he has, right? Of course, he wants his father to be more present. He wants his father to have been different than he was, but he can't blame him for being someone who he isn't, right? And so it's really good for God the Father to help him with that.
And like with all the times that my dad has failed me, and I mean even now he still currently fails me, I don't resent him for it. I don't hate him for it. I still love him. I still want the best for him, and that's all I can really do, right? Is just approach him, as much as I can with a Christ-like love.
Yeah.
And again, like I said earlier, it's not easy. It's not the simple path or simple instruction. It's not easy.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the other day my wife asked me if my relationship with my father affects my relationship with God, the Father, right?
Mm-hmm.
And immediately I was like, no. My relationship with God the Father is so incredibly different and can never be compared to my relationship with my father, because then he can never measure up, right? He can never be the same thing for me as God the Father is, right?
Mm-hmm.
He can be everything else, but he can't be God the Father, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people that when they struggle with one, they struggle with the other though.
Yeah, I know.
At least at some point,
right? But I never had that major wound, so I guess that's why it's easy for me just to say that it doesn't, right? Because I've had a good father, right? Regardless of my criticism now of thinking about how I want to be a father and how I might differently, and my father was very good.
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, that's definitely the truth for a lot of people, is that they can't have a good relationship with God the Father, specifically like that person of the Trinity, because their relationship with their father is so complicated or muddled, right?
Mm.
Those wounds have a
Yeah.
great effect. Dobby, want to
Yeah,
talk
Dobby, do you?
fatherhood?
Yeah, come share some stuff before we end this podcast. Take it away.
Okay, let me preface this. Dobby takes a lot of time to process what he's thinking. And so when I hit him up right away with like, talk about fatherhood, now he's going to spend probably about 5 minutes thinking about it. So Chris, why don't you go first? And then we'll get a really good response from Dobby, but let's give him a little, like, not put him on the spot so much, you know?
Well, we can hope
Yeah.
that.
Honestly, I guess something that kind of bugs me about my relationship with my dad is that I just see how he's such a hard worker, right? He really embodies that a self-sacrificial attitude, right? And he's because he works as a postman, right? So his job is really hard, heat wave, blizzard, whatever. And then, it's a blizzard, he does his post route, and then he comes back and then he'll shovel the driveway or something, right? Or he'll do the heat wave and then he has to go water all the plants and everything because it's so hot outside. And like obviously I help him now at this stage of my life, but just something I don't know that really gets to me is that sometimes I'm just unable to be the son that I want to be for him, right? I want to be the son who's able to cut the grass and have everything done by the time he gets home. But, his start time is so early and he finishes so early. It's hard for me to actually get up in the morning in time, do my prayers and everything. And then be ready to have everything done by the time he gets home. And then if it's not done, he'll just start doing it, right? And I don't want to have to say, Dad, don't do everything, slow down so that way I can do it at a slower pace. I want to just say, Dad, don't. I just want him to have to not worry about it, right? Instead of having to make him compromise so that way I can help him. That's the opposite of what I want, right? So yeah, that's I guess kind of my struggle, is just feeling sometimes like I gotta prove myself. And I shared with us this beautiful podcast about fatherhood and the orphan mentality of, I gotta prove myself to my father. And I do see that in myself. I do see myself feeling I have to prove myself. And there's an element where you have to let God, right? Because I don't have that same thing with God. I know I suck. I know if God doesn't help me at every moment, I'm not going to do anything worth praise in his eyes, right? So I already have that relationship with God, but it's about, for me, trying to get that relationship into my my familial relationship. So my earthly father relationship. Yeah, but again, he's a great man. He's taught me to work so hard. And again, sometimes I doubt myself because I just think, man, am I willing to do what he does for me and my family? Yeah, I pray to be able to work that hard. So thanks, Dad, and thanks to all the dads who, make those sacrifices. That's my bit.
My bit.
I like how you mentioned how, the relationship with your dad also involves, your sonship, right? And how when you become a father, you don't stop being a son, right? You're not so different from how you are now, if you think about it, right? Yeah, in the future when you have kids, you have more responsibility, but you still have to be a son, right? And if your dad is present in your life, you still have to be a son to him, right? And even still with your father in heaven, you still have to honor your father, pray to him, ask for his help. and to remember that, you know, you can't really prove yourself, right? Like, honestly, I can't imagine what it's like for someone who has a father who needs to prove themselves to their father all the time. You know, I've never experienced that. But it's tough. But really, yeah, it's tough being a son too. I don't know where I was going with that thought.
Yeah, and it's not because, I just want to clarify, it's not because my dad doesn't love me or something, or I'm
Yeah, yeah.
scraping for his attention. You know what I mean? It's literally just what I said, and I just think that knowing my own faults and failures in the past have really, buried that idea deep inside me,
Mhm.
where, oh, I keep failing, I keep failing. Um, but then again, I guess
Like your dad
that's
doesn't
also
punish you
that.
for it, which is good, right?
Right, right.
Like he doesn't guilt you when he gets home and he's like, "Oh, what the hell? My son didn't cut the grass." Like
Yeah,
whether you do it or not, like he'll still be okay with doing it, right?
yeah,
And he'll still be okay with you.
yeah, yeah.
Dobby, got any thoughts about fatherhood?
Well, I mean, so like as some
I got it. Go
Thank you.
for it.
so like as some context, I am originally from Vancouver, so my family lives at home, my dad included, and I am exiled in Toronto.
Yes.
Boo Leafs.
Blue Leafs. Oh gosh. Like
Yeah.
not like you're even a hockey fan.
Well,
Anyway.
it's an obligatory.
Oh, is it?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
I am contractually obliged.
To not like the Leafs.
Yes.
Just because you came from the I got you. Okay.
Yeah. So like the past years of being in university, I've only really been able to talk to my dad at Christmas and every week over phone call. But as everyone knows, due to coronavirus, phone calls are really not the same as interacting with someone in person.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of coming out of university, I've been thinking about the ways that my parents have raised me and like the habits and things that they've taught me. And like one thing that my father, like he didn't really explicitly, well, some things were pretty straightforward, but like one thing he always emphasized was service. So like some of the very straightforward ways that he would do it would always be like, go see if your mom needs any help. Like, does she need help chopping veggies or like drying the dishes, help in the kitchen, stuff like that, doing chores. But also the things that he would do for my mom. Like when I was very young, my parents, they would do this thing where my mom, she works at the hospital, so she would work graveyard shifts and she would work overnight. So, and my dad worked a 9-to-5 job during the day, so one of them would always be with myself and siblings. But he would always drive by after his work to pick up my mom, and he would open the door and do all those little things to, in like as acts of service towards my mom. And I think I picked up a lot of how to serve others in that way, just in the small things. So like I'm grateful for my dad for teaching me all those things. But yeah, like it's been a bit difficult it's been difficult the past years that I've been in university and even growing up, because I've never really had a close relationship with my dad, even though he's been a pretty good father to me. Like he's not really been harsh. He's always been very open about his like wanting to have a good relationship with me, but I've not really been able to kind of reciprocate that. Especially the past few years as I've grown up to be an adult and am aware of having good relationships with parents, not really being like a teen where it's like, oh yeah, parents, what do they know?
Yeah.
So that's been kind of a bit more difficult.
Yeah. It's something to think about, how our fathers, like all four of us, right? All four of our fathers never blamed us for not being the son they wanted us to be, right? In terms of like hard work and all those things, right? Like when
Being
we didn't
Muslim.
work as hard as we were supposed to, instead of our fathers looking at us and being
Hey, my dad is not mad at me for being Christian. Well, kind of.
That's what I said. That's what I said. He's not mad at you for
Yeah.
being Muslim.
he's not
or
mad
not
at
being Muslim.
It just all we heard was be Muslim. So
No.
I think it's interesting that like our fathers were always so gracious to us to never blame us for not working as hard as they do, right? And we're
Yeah.
with us to get to the point where we had that desire to work that hard, right?
Ish.
Yeah.
What
One
happened to
sec.
you? Ish, we're in the middle of a
No.
podcast. Okay.
Sorry. That was Ariane. She just called me.
I see.
I told her I was doing a podcast, but
Oh my
she's like,
gosh.
she just can't wait. Gosh.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Look at you guys. So engaged and in love. But I have
Yeah.
met Dobby's dad, and I will say that I think that both of them are very similar in that they're very like pensive about conversation, but they both desire a deep relationship with each other. And I think like as life goes on, all of our fathers are looking more to love us as we grow, right? Because if you really think about it, like we grow so quickly, right? Like the difference between 1 year and the next is astronomical when you're a child or a teenager, right? And for your father to keep up with that is really hard. And they're always trying to find ways to love you who you are now as opposed to who you were a year ago, right? Because you change so quickly, and the things that happen in your life affect you in such a deep way. It is truly hard to try and maintain that deep relationship all throughout your life with your father. And when you get to be our age now, you start to realize that like now you are actually required to put in an effort to make that happen, right? Which is something I've started to realize about my dad. It's like my dad is definitely open to having that deep relationship, but now I actually have to put in effort to make that happen, right?